Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajagacharya Sutta Shishi Maharaj Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajagacharya Sutta Shishi Maharaj Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giridhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Brihat Madanga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Garanga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, that's correct now. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 6th Chapter, Text 22. Yasmat andam virajagne. Yasmat andam virajagne. Putendriya gunatmakaha. Putendriya gunatmakaha. Tadravyam atyagad vishvam. Tadravyam atyagad vishvam. Gobi Surya Ivatapan. Gobi Surya Ivatapan. Yasmadandam Virajagne. Putendriya Gunatmakaha. Tadravyam Atyagad Vishvam. Gobi Surya Ivatapan. Vaishnavis. Yasmad, from whom? Andam, the universal globes. Virat, and the gigantic universal form. Jagne appeared. Bhuta, elements. Indriya, senses. Gunatmakaha, qualitative. Tatravyam, the universes and the universal form, etc. Atyagat, surpassed. Vishvam, all the universes. Gobi, by the rays. Surya, the sun. Eva, like. Atapan, distributed rays and heat. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. From that personality of God, this is Lord Brahma speaking, by the way. From that personality of Godhead, all the universal globes and the universal form with all material elements, qualities, and senses are generated. Yet, He, capital H, is aloof from such material manifestations, like the sun, which is separate from its rays and heat. Purport. The Supreme Truth has been ascertained in the previous verse as Purusha, or the Purushottama, the Supreme Person. The Absolute Person is the Ishvara, or the Supreme Controller, by His different energies. The Ekapad Vibhuti manifestation of the material energy of the Lord is just like one of the many mistresses of the Lord by whom the Lord is not so much attracted, as indicated in the language of the Gita, Bina Prakriti. But the region of the Tripad Vibhuti, being a pure spiritual manifestation of the energy of the Lord, is, so to speak, more attractive to Him. The Lord therefore generates the material manifestations by impregnating the material energy, and then, within the manifestation, He expands Himself as a gigantic form of the Vishvarup. The Vishvarup, as it was shown to Arjuna, is not the original form of the Lord. The original form of the Lord is the transcendental form of Purushottam, or Krishna Himself. It is very nicely explained herein that He expands Himself just like the sun. The sun expands itself by its terrible heat and rays, yet the sun is always aloof from such rays and heat. The impersonalist takes into consideration the rays of the Lord without any information of the tangible, transcendental, eternal form of the Lord, known as Krishna. Therefore, Krishna, in His supreme personal form with 2 hands and a flute, is bewildering for the impersonalists who can accommodate only the gigantic Vishvarup of the Lord. They should know that the rays of the sun are secondary to the sun. And similarly, the impersonal gigantic form of the Lord is also secondary to the personal form as Purushottam. The Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, text 37, confirms this statement as follows. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabis Tabirya Eva Nijik Rupataya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasat Yakilat Mabuto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, the one who enlivens the senses of everyone by His personal bodily rays, resides in His transcendental abode called Goloka. Yet He is present in every nook and corner of His creation by His expansion of happy spiritual rays, equal in power to His personal potency of bliss. He is therefore simultaneously personal and impersonal by His inconceivable potency. Or He is one without a second, displaying complete unity in a diversity of material and spiritual manifestations. He is separate from everything, and still nothing is different from Him. Om Ganatamaram Dasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swaparamtikam. Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvikams Cha Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaudangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpa Durubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so like I mentioned, this is Lord Brahma speaking, and he's speaking to Narada Muni. And so he's saying here, he's telling Narada Muni that the personality of Godhead, from the personality of Godhead, all the universal globes and the universal form with all material elements, qualities, and senses are generated. So upon hearing this, one might think, well, okay, if this is Lord Brahma saying that the personality of Godhead is doing all this, he's generating the globes and the elements and the qualities and the senses, and somebody might ask the question, a devotee might ask the question, okay, well, what's Lord Brahma doing then? What are you doing? Because, we hear that Lord Brahma is the chief engineer, and so, he's saying that Krishna's doing all this, so what are you doing? Well, you're not, if you're thinking like that, if you're wondering that, you're not the only one. I mean, Narada Muni was Narada Muni was wondering something like that too. If you remember back in the 5th chapter, in a slightly different way, he was asking Lord Brahma, he was saying, hey, it seems to me, on one level, it seems to me that you're doing everything. You're responsible for everything, creating everything. That seems to be your position, but I'm a little bit perplexed by something here, and he says, and he explained to Lord Brahma, but I see you're worshiping somebody. So what's going on here? I thought you were the top person, but yet I see you're performing tapasya. You're worshiping somebody. So is there somebody superior to you? Am I getting that right? So and then Lord Brahma basically, thanked him for his question, and he said, "Yeah, thank you, son. That's a good catch. You got it." And then Lord Brahma explained to him that actually I'm just an instrument. And there's a very nice place in the 5th chapter. It's just the chapter before this, where that Lord Brahma states that, and then Prabhupada elaborates upon it. Gives a very nice analogy in the purport to make it crystal clear what's going on as much as possible. So this is from the 5th chapter, text 11. Lord Brahma says, in response to Narada Muni's question about, well, what's going on here? I thought you were the supreme creator. What's that verse, Archie? Archie, you know that verse? What's the Sanskrit? You always quote it, about the one where Narada Muni is asking Lord Brahma, who's the supreme? Yeah. Translation? Right. Now that's Narada Muni saying that to Lord Brahma, right? Right. See, so he's, so then Lord Brahma has to explain to him that actually I'm not the top. I'm not the supreme person. And this is part of his explanation. He says, I create after the Lord's creation by his personal effulgence, known as the Brahma Jyoti. Just as when the sun manifests its fire, the moon, firmament, the influential planets, and the twinkling of the stars are all manifest their brightness. Okay, so he's clearly saying there that he's not the origin, but he's in the picture, but he's not. And here's Prabhupada's nice analogy, which really makes it the whole thing a lot clearer. So Prabhupada says in the purport here about this. Lord Brahma's position. He says, okay, find it exactly where. Just as a small seed, here it comes, just as a small seed of a banyan fruit has the potency to create a big banyan tree, the Lord disseminates all varieties of seeds by his personal Brahmajyoti. And the seeds are made to develop by the watering process of persons like Brahma. Brahma cannot create the seeds, whatever exactly the seeds are, okay? He doesn't create them. He says, but he can manifest the seed into a tree, just as a gardener helps plants and orchards to grow by the watering process. See, so that really helps, at least helped me, kind of understand the relationship between Krishna, Brahma, and also us. See, we're like in this analogy, we'd like be the people who go to the supermarket and buy the fruits and vegetables that, you know, the gardener out there who plants the seeds and waters them grows. There's a big difference. You know, the person who's the gardener is a lot more responsible for the production of food, so to speak, than the person who goes to the supermarket and just shops and buys a bunch of stuff, right? So that's like us, you know. And Lord Brahma is like the gardener, but there's also a big difference between the gardener and whoever the heck is coming up with those seeds, which are pretty incredible things when you stop and think about it. As Prabhupada says here, a banyan tree is in a little seed of a banyan tree, and there's a whole banyan tree in there. And what this, you know, all the other fruits and vegetables. And anyway, seed is being used in a metaphorical sense here. The seeds are like little packages of intelligence or whatever it is. But Lord Brahma doesn't create those seeds. And that's Krishna. See? So the point is here that, you know, the important thing for us to understand is that as far as the creation goes, yeah, Lord Brahma gets a lot of credit, but Krishna does the heavy lifting. You've heard that expression? Krishna does the heavy lifting. It's Krishna who's responsible ultimately for the creation. Lord Brahma is the gardener. Gardener gets a lot of credit. I'd like to be a gardener. That would be fun, you know, to do all the gardening and come up with all these nice different fruit trees and plants and things. But, you know, you can't take credit as if you're like the original, real creator of the whole thing. That's Krishna. Krishna does the heavy lifting. So whatever you know, is in creation, is being in existence. Lord Brahma is like the gardener. Okay, so the next point in this purport, getting back to today's purport. So Prabhupada talks about how this material energy, he says it's not, let me see how he says it. He describes it as the Lord is, yeah, the Ekapad Vibhuti, the material energy, is a manifestation of the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is just like one of the many mistresses of the Lord, by whom the Lord is not so much attracted, as indicated in the language of the Gita, Vina Prakriti. So I'll say something about that. It's kind of, Vina means separated. Separated. Prakriti is, you know, the energy. So it's the separated energy. And the analogy that came to my mind is, well, that's understandable because, you know, elsewhere we hear how the material energy is like the prison system. You know, like a reform school, prison. Well, let's use the prison system, okay? So the prison system is there, and it's a government department, and the government is, you know, funding the prison system and running it, basically, ultimately, except for these days, a lot of them are privately run. It's become a business, but anyway, we won't go into that. But, you know, the government's running the prison by funding it, so many different other aspects of the management. But, you know, on his day off, or on his vacation, on his 2-week vacation, very unlikely that the President of the United States is going to go visit the prisons. It's not an attractive place. It's there as part of the whole shebang, so to speak, but it's not an attractive place. I mean, well, would any of you want to go visit the prisons when you get 2 weeks off? No. It's, you know, it's there, it's okay, it's part of the whole government, part of the United States, but it's kind of, the expression, you wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's kind of like that. You keep it at a distance. Well, I don't want to do it's unpleasant. So that's Krishna's being a prakritist. He's not so attracted to it. He's not so interested in it. But he is interested in the pure spiritual manifestation, of the Tripad Vibhuti. Okay, and Prabhupada now, he talks about the universal form here in this purport. Says, how he leads into that, this is the impression I got as I was reading this purport, that, Krishna is not so attracted by this Ekapad Vibhuti. He doesn't really want to, he's got responsibility there, but he doesn't want to have so much to do it. And it talks about how he generates the material manifestations by impregnating the material energy, and then within the manifestation he expands himself as the gigantic form of the Vishvarup. And then it talks about the Vishvarup. And it says that the Vishvarup, as it was shown to Arjuna, is not the original form of the Lord. The original form of the Lord is the transcendental form of Purushottama or Krishna. So as far as this universal form goes, universal form, as we've heard in classes by Judah Karma, there's a bunch of universal forms. There's one that was shown to Arjuna. There's one that's described to Maharaj Parikshit by Sukadev Goswami and others. But in general, the devotees aren't so much interested in the universal form. It's not that important. Like, for instance, Arjuna. Okay, why did Arjuna want to see the universal form? Well, he really didn't. I mean, he had no personal thing, and he wanted to see the universal form. Arjuna's motive for asking Krishna to display the universal form was that he wanted to set a precedent. He wanted to establish a criteria that if somebody's going to come along and say that they're God, then you could ask them, okay, you're God? Great. Let's see your universal form. Because if you're God, you should be able to produce the universal form. Because Krishna, when he produced it. So he was setting a precedent. He was asking Krishna to set a precedent and establish a criteria. It was preaching motive, basically. See? So anyway, what happened was Arjuna asked Krishna to do that, and Krishna said, okay, I'll show you the universal form. And he showed him he showed him the universal form. And then at some point, Arjuna, it didn't take too long, Arjuna had to go, whoa, Krishna, this is like a little bit more than I can handle, Remember? In the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita there, he goes, Krishna, okay, I think I've seen enough. Take it back. And there's one, he basically asked Krishna to do that. And Krishna obliged. And there's one verse here where, Krishna talks about that. And Prabhupada says something interesting in the purport that gives us some insight into why the universal form is not attractive to the devotee. But so here's what Krishna says in response to after Arjuna asked him to show him the two-arm form again. He wanted to go back to the other thing. And Krishna says, you have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form you desire. So, Arjuna was asking, let me see a two-arm form again, or at least a four-arm form, but not this universal form. Enough for that. Okay? So then in the purport, Prabhupada explains, he says, a devotee is not much interested in the universal form, for it does not enable one to reciprocate loving feelings. That's it. That's the essence right there. Either a devotee wants to offer his respectful, worshipful feelings, or he wants to see the two-handed form of Krishna so that he can reciprocate in loving service with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. See, so that's devotee's mentality. Devotee wants to do that. He wants to reciprocate in loving service with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the universal form doesn't facilitate that. So it's really not something that the devotee is very interested in, at least for the purposes of his own personal advancement, devotional service. And if you remember, it's not just Arjuna that had that reaction. There was a couple other devotees also that really didn't have a great experience with the universal form. I mean, Modi Yasoda, she saw the universal form, and she didn't ask. She just asked Krishna to open his mouth, right? Because he got accused of eating dirt by his brother, was it? By Balaram? Right, yeah, everybody. They're all the cowherd boys were accusing Krishna of eating dirt, and Balaram was part of the conspiracy. And basically, you can call it that. So Krishna said, okay, Mom, you think I'm eating? Look, just look in my mouth. And Mother Yasoda looked in his mouth, and she saw the universal form. And her experience was like, she got bewildered, right? So much so that she didn't ask to take it away, but Krishna could understand it. She was getting very bewildered, so he just went back to normal. So she didn't have a good experience with the universal form. And Markandeya Rishi, he even had a worse one. Markandeya Rishi was kind of got what he deserved. Well, I mean, he was a very elevated devotee, but he was kind of curious, right? And he said he was offered a benediction, was it? And he asked to see the universal form. He kind of thought, well, this could be far out, you know. And then he regretted it because he had a Krishna, you know. Anyway, he had a really he saw. How did it go? He saw like the waters of devastation. I mean, he got very frightened. He got very frightened by the universal form, and it didn't kind of end as quickly as he would have liked it to. But it had a happy ending ultimately. But you know, he also didn't have a good experience with the universal form. And one other thing about the universal form was, even as a preaching thing, you know, Arjuna did ask Krishna for that reason, because he, you know, wanted to establish the criteria. But it's questionable as to whether it's a very effective preaching thing, because when Krishna went to negotiate peace with the Kauravas, and at one point he was there confronting Duryodhana, and he showed a universal form. Not the same universal form that he showed to Arjuna, but he did show a universal form to Duryodhana, and it didn't work. I mean, it worked in the sense that Krishna showed the universal form, but it didn't transform, it didn't convert Duryodhana. In other words, Duryodhana didn't get it from that. You know, as a result of seeing Krishna's universal form, it's not like he thought, uh-oh, I think I might be making a mistake here about how I'm dealing, you know, my understanding might be. No, he just kind of thought, oh, this is just some mystic trick, right? And he just continued on in his same mentality, so it wasn't so effective as far as that went either. So that's about the universal form. Okay, then there was one, a little bit further down here in the purport, there was one phrase that really caught my attention, and I found interesting. What Prabhupada says here, he's in his translation of that verse from the Brahma Samhita, he says, Govinda enlivens the senses of everyone by his personal bodily rays, resides in his transcendental abode called Goloka, yet he is present in every nook and corner of his creation by expansion of his happy spiritual rays, equal in power to his personal potency of bliss. So happy spiritual rays. I think that was the first and only time I'd ever come across that. Happy spiritual rays. So that's a nice thought, you know, that everything, the entire creation, material creation as well, is being permeated. Everything's permeated by these happy spiritual rays that are emanating from the body of Krishna. So that's yeah, that's interesting. And so that made me think that, you know, ultimately there's goodwill and benevolence underlying even the material creation, because it's all, you know, these happy, it's all resting upon Brahmano hi pratishtaham. Krishna says, I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, these happy spiritual rays. So here's an analogy that, I mean, hopefully it's not too far-fetched, but imagine, say somebody's in a prison, somebody's a criminal and they're in a prison, and so that's not a pleasant experience, but at the same time, that prisoner, he can appreciate that, wow, you know what, I mean, I committed a crime, I knocked that old lady down and grabbed the purse, and, you know, she got hurt, and they caught me, and that's why I'm in here, you know, so I deserve it. But boy, it's pretty good. I mean, if somebody would have done that to my mother, I would have killed them. But here I'm just being put in this prison and being, punished. They're trying to reform me. And meantime, they got a nice cell. It's got it's got a heater in it. It's got running water. I mean, I get fed a couple times a day. And look at the place. It's not so bad, In other words, the prisoner is appreciating that, okay, this is kind of a nice prison. I mean, so in other words, even in the material world, it's being permeated by these happy spiritual rays. It's permeated by some benevolence and some goodwill. And there's even a conditioned soul suffering in the material world should be able to see that there's some sort of a, love or friend behind this whole thing. I mean, okay, we're here, we're conditioned souls, but Krishna is giving, it's a lot of things that are enjoyable. You got the fresh air, you got the sunshine, so that's, anyway, that's I equated that with the happy spiritual rays, that underlying material life, there's these happy spiritual rays. There's something, there's one, it was a conversation, I remember Prabhupada said, made the comment something to the effect, can't you see there's a friend behind the, the material energy like that. So I kind of tied that in with that. Anyway, but ultimately we're interested in not the happy spiritual rays. We're interested in the happy spiritual person that the happy spiritual rays are coming from. And that, of course, is Krishna. Krishna is the source of all those happy spiritual rays. Okay. Well, what time is it? 20 after? Okay, I could stop there. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to say about any of those points? Yeah. Yeah. Set a precedent, establish a criteria. Uh-huh. I don't know. Okay. What would I say? I don't know. Can somebody help me out with that? I challenge somebody and I say, can you show me a universal form? And they say, well, you don't qualify to see the universal form. What would be the counter response? No, he's saying I'm not qualified for him to show me the universal form. I'm challenging somebody. If you say you're God, show me the universal form. And then he comes back and says, well, I'd show you my universal form if you were qualified, but you're not qualified. What would be my counter response? Yeah. Make me qualified. Yeah, you're God, you can make me qualified. Yeah, if you're God, you could do anything, so make me qualified. Anyway. Might be tough to deal with somebody that's that much of a rascal. Yeah, go ahead.
And say, well, hold on. We have, actually in the creation of God, there's a lot of beautiful things that we can also appreciate, like the beautiful flowers that you see, the smells, and the rivers, cascades, and everything. And the person doesn't necessarily has to be really bad to feel like, wow, you know, or really struggling and suffering. We also have people who, within the prison house, we have people who appreciate, you can say, nature, and in that way maybe God. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it doesn't really necessarily appear to be really horrible. And
Well, we're all being reformed. Everybody, all the conditioned souls here in the material, we're all being reformed. But we're not all on the same level. It's just like when you're in the educational system. Not everybody's in kindergarten. There's kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Junior high school, college, and then graduate. And see, so the further you go in the educational system, the higher up you go, the more freedom you have. First in kindergarten, you had to be in the classroom, until your mom and dad came, or somebody came to pick you up. Or something. When you're a postgraduate or something like that, they just tell you, well, you're going to write your thesis. Okay, well, let us know when you got it all together, and well, you have to defend it. You know what I'm saying? So souls are on all sorts of different levels here in the material world, and that's why some souls are suffering like dogs or worse, and some souls seem to be, having a pretty good time. And especially if you get past these middle planetary systems, even above Svargaloka, you got Janaloka, Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, like that, and they're sages, and I don't think they're sitting around thinking like, well, we're really suffering. No. But at the same time, they're still conditioned souls, and they're still in the material world, and they still know that, with their intelligence, they can understand that I'm okay. I'm having a pretty good time here, but I know this is not, the situation I'm in is not ideal. I got to go to the spiritual world so I think it's something like that people are on different levels according to their karma. You get a particular body and you experience life in a particular way. But we're all here to get reformed. Everybody's a conditioned soul, is in that reform school, so to speak. But some are in kindergarten and some are doing PhD work. That makes sense? Yeah. Anybody else have anything they want to? Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare